November 15th, 2023 edition of the Urban League Jobs Network Digital Career Success Series, brought to you by the National Urban League. I'm your host, Kenneth L. Johnson, president of the Harlem, New York-based diversity recruitment firm East Coast Executives. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. You know what? Drop in the chat. Let us know where you're from. I see Columbia, South Carolina's in the building. So drop in the chat for us. The Digital Career Success Series, DCSS, is a professional development series that helps members of our Urban League Young Professional chapters and other diverse job seekers develop new skill sets that will enhance their careers through digital platforms and webinars such as Facebook and Instagram Live. The goal is to provide an opportunity for professional development right from one's computer. All right, if you want more, visit www.nuljobsnetwork.com. Okay, I'm excited today. This topic is one that people have requested. It's Recover from Burnout, and we have with us today Chanel Johnson and Jenny Vasquez Newsom. Chanel, welcome to the Digital Career Success Series.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with all of you today.
Do me a favor, please. Tell our audience a little bit about Chanel Johnson.
Yeah. So I'm a 15-year veteran in the field of human resources. Today, I am a strategic advisor to many senior and executive leadership teams. And I also provide organizational development and leadership coaching and consulting as well. My coaching services are typically offered to high-performing professionals, those who are new and emerging leaders. And our focus is on self-actualization. I believe that contributing factors to becoming our best selves starts with awareness, and awareness of our preferences, and awareness of how we show up and how other people experience us, and awareness of our value, unconnected or disconnected from an organization, a title, or a person. And so I believe that we are all leaders of ourselves first, before we are leaders of others. And in order to have the impact that we all desire to have, we need to master our own leadership. Excited to be here to talk about burnout also, as I am a burnout survivor. Probably should have led with that. And so I have the personal experience of burnout and the journey of recovery.
Well, we appreciate having you on, and hopefully you'll share candidly about your experience. I heard you speak about leadership, and it's really important when you have the leadership conversation to include Jenny Vasquez Newsom to the conversation. Jenny, how are you?
Good. How are you? I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to see you again. You know, we were together in Houston for the National Urban League Conference and hung out. We did a panel there, and you were amazing. So I'm excited to have you back on this platform. But just in case people weren't in Houston, would you tell them a little bit about yourself, please?
Yes, absolutely. So I am based here in Southern California, and I founded and run a leadership development organization called Untapped Leaders, which centers marginalized perspectives in the leadership conversation. So my background is in education and leadership development, kind of, supporting leaders from across stages of their careers. So high school students to seasoned executives, but really, over that time of doing that work and studying these frameworks, I realized that a lot has been developed by folks that don't look like me or have my lived experiences. And I really saw this gap in representation when we talk about what leadership is. And so that's where, my work through Untapped Leaders really brings that to the forefront so that we can talk leadership in ways that resonate and are relevant to all of us that have varied lived experiences. So I'm also excited to kind of dig into this conversation around burnout, because I do connect it to this like antiquated ideas of what leadership is, and how, a lot of times what we think leadership is doing, sometimes it's actually fostering a culture of burnout. And so we want to divest from that. So I'm looking forward to this.
Man, yes. Looking forward to it indeed. You know what? Hey, let's just get this off the table now. You have a book out. Am I correct?
I do. Yes. So Untapped Leadership, Harnessing the Power of Underrepresented Leaders is a book that published this past June. So it is out in the world, and you can get it wherever you get your books. But really, it's to change the narrative of what leadership is, and really centering, again, our perspectives. So for a lot of folks probably on this call, we're really trying to center our perspectives when we have these conversations about leadership.
A lot of folks on the call indeed. St. Louis, Florida, Akron, Ohio, Philly, New York City, of course, Columbia, South Carolina. So everybody's excited. I'm sure my colleagues will drop the title of your book and possibly a link on where people can go and get that into the chat. All right, let's get started. I'm sure, Chanel, that they want us to define burnout.
Yes. So the World Health Organization defines burnout as a syndrome conceptualized as resulting from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. One of the important call outs here is that the World Health Organization has seen that this topic is so important that they have attached a definition to it. They are equipping people with how to recognize it. And there are many conversations that members of WHO is having around who's responsible for it. Initially, when the organization began to talk about it, a lot of emphasis and insinuation was towards the individual, employees who are experiencing burnout. More recently, they are putting it in what I believe to be the proper place, although there is shared responsibility in this matter as well. And so they're giving more focus to what organizations do or don't do, how they operate, that contributes to burnout with employees and across various different organizations and professions. So that was the major takeaway from here, is to really set some definition to what burnout is, begin to talk about how you can identify it or what it looks like, and then also start the conversation around shared responsibility.
Yeah, all definite points that I think need to be addressed. Once we define burnout, which you just did, I think people, after they know what it is, they kind of want to know what causes it. So it's my understanding there are about 6 causes of burnout. So let's kind of tap in. Jenny, I want to bring you into the conversation.
Yeah, I love kind of again the highlight that a lot of times burnout is created by the systems that you're operating within, and so when we're looking at the causes, before going internal to like a self deficit, we really want to look at like what is it in my environment that's kind of creating this sense of burnout. And so absolutely, number one is unsustainable workloads. In my experiences with burnout, that has been one of the top factors where you're taking on roles and responsibilities where you're stretched so thin, and you're having to juggle all the balls, and you have to do all the things, and people are looking at you to succeed, and to sustain that over time. It's not realistic, and so that really is one of the top causes of burnout. I think other aspects that you can read here, but I'll just name with some stories and some reflections around leadership is this perceived lack of control or autonomy, where a biggest cause of stress is not necessarily like doing things that are super important, and being able to do them, like you have control over that. It's when you're kind of lacking control over things that are super important. So like your job or the way you do your job, that takes your agency away, and that is depleting. And so that's really, really challenging to navigate. So I'll pause there just to have Chanel jump in as well.
Just in speaking about that, so Chanel, it seems like when people have a perceived lack of control, sometimes the workload is causing some of that, right? Because they never feel like they're caught up. So and then subsequently they feel burned out. Am I accurate in my assessment of how that cycle works?
Yeah, that could definitely be one component of it. One of the other components that goes along with that lack of control or perceived lack of control and autonomy many times is mismatched values and skill sets. Either they are requesting work of you that you are not capable of performing because it doesn't fall within the set of your skills or your knowledge or your abilities, or they are asking you to show up in a way that conflicts with your own values and your own morals. Or you're working for individuals who are in the wrong roles at the wrong time. There's so many different scenarios that this list of causes can cover. Speaking for me personally, when I experienced burnout, it was all of these that were coming into play. I was in a position where I had the perception of autonomy, but I really did not have the power to make the change that needed to be made, which created an unsustainable workload because things were not being resolved, processes were not being improved, programming was not being changed. And then I was surrounded by people who were not in positions that they were really capable of handling and executing well on, which created a lack of community and relationship across me and my peers and my colleagues. So I got up every day with this drive to make impact and was inhibited in being able to do so by all of these contributing factors here. And then it just wore me out and it wore me down. And one day I had what I call this mini blow up. And in that moment, I was like, something is not right here.
So, all right, help me out here. So I'm looking here at the list of kind of 6 pillars or causes, and I'm seeing insufficient recognition or rewards regarding effort, right? So is that just about being seen and being acknowledged?
Yeah, and I wouldn't necessarily put like just in front of that. People need to be recognized for their efforts and for the impact that they're making on the organization that employs them. And it needs to be done in a way that's meaningful and relevant for them, right? Some organizations, they recognize the people who are the greatest cheerleaders. And I mean the outward cheerleaders, rah, 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 for the organization. They don't always recognize the one who is giving a healthy challenge to where the organization is going and how they plan to get there in order to test the proficiency and the efficiency of their plan. And so when you are contributing to greater levels of excellence within the organization, but the person who is rah, rah, rah all the time is the one who's getting recognized, then internally you begin to question, what is my value here? Why am I here? Right? So it's displays of appreciation, it's acknowledgement of what you're contributing within the scope of your role and outside of the bounds of your role. When that doesn't happen, then it wears on a person's mental and emotional capacity, which is another more simplified definition of burnout: mental and emotional exhaustion.
Wow. Okay. Jenny, I'm reading here lack of community or relationships. From a leadership lens, what are the leader's responsibilities to kind of curate and present opportunities that allow for community involvement internally in the workplace or relationship building?
I mean, I think ultimately this onus really does fall on the leaders, or as I would say, folks in positions of authority in an organization, because you have the power to create the environments where everyone can feel full, can thrive, can contribute, be valued, and be connected with each other. And so, when we kind of think of lack of community and relationships, I really reflect on just kind of the nature of workplaces sometimes, where a lot of things, you're like kind of dealing with things in isolation, that you're like struggling and trying to figure it out and trying to, navigate and accomplish all these goals. And if you're struggling, you don't connect, you don't speak out, you don't want to, out yourself, quote unquote. And that's really like how we've been operating in these workplaces, that's kind of these isolated experiences. And ultimately, I think for us to really build thriving work environments, it is about collective leadership. That's where this whole work around untapped leadership is, that there's a lot of assets and perspectives and contributions all at the table. And if the leader or person of authority is leaving people out, is, kind of compartmentalizing, is not kind of creating a safe space for everyone to offer a dissenting opinion, be their authentic selves, all the things, then you are, creating the grounds for burnout to exist, to thrive, to like, it could be there. And you had no idea, you're actually implementing that.
So Chanel, I was looking in the chat, and I think I was reading a piece that you authored somewhere on LinkedIn, but this person in the chat was speaking about being asked to train people on something that they weren't familiar with themselves. So that's kind of the mismatched skills part of this conversation. Is that something that like, what's the process to that? And how does someone kind of combat that, or at least position themselves to say, hey, listen, I'm uncomfortable with this particular task that I've been assigned?
Yeah. So transparency and questions, right? Transparency is, I hear what you're asking of me, and I even thank you for the opportunity. However, I'm not sure if I'm the right person to do this, and this is why. What exactly are your expectations for me in training this person? What are you hoping that this person will be able to walk away with? And what does success look like? So in their responses to you, then you ask for the support that you need in order to meet those expectations. If it's time, if it's training resources, if it's further direction, whatever it is. And what you're doing in that, you're clearly stating up front that I appreciate you identifying me, but here's what my concerns are. In order to accept this assignment or this expectation that you set for me, and to deliver on it in a way that's going to be effective, this is what I need. So it goes back to being able to advocate for yourself, right? Not necessarily say, oh, this stretch opportunity is not right for me, so I'm going to toss it to the wind. It's, I appreciate this stretch opportunity. Here's where some of my concerns lie. What are your expectations? And then here's the type of support I need in order to meet your expectations.
Typically, where do those conversations take place? What's the proper protocol for engaging with leadership or your particular line manager with that conversation? Like, any steps on how to make that, I guess, a very comfortable conversation to be had?
Ideally, it would be in a one-on-one type scenario. And if your leader, your manager is not scheduling a regular cadence of one-on-ones for you, advocate for yourself and schedule them for yourself. In that one-on-one environment, it allows you an opportunity to be most vulnerable, especially if you're not comfortable with doing that in a group setting. Okay. It gives you focused time for that manager to hear from you and then be able to provide a response, whether it's an additional support or, hey, let me take that away and follow up.
All right, excellent. I know I saw in the chat that someone asked for the PowerPoint to this. This episode of the Digital Career Success Series will definitely be on the YouTube channel. If you go to YouTube, UL Jobs Network Digital Career Success Series, you can find this and all of our Urban League Jobs Network Digital Career Success Series programming there. Please drop your questions in the Q&A, because we will have a Q&A coming up soon. But in the meantime, let's kind of move forward. Let's speak about the 6 steps of burnout recovery. So if we can go to the next slide, please. All right, excellent. So 6 steps of burnout recovery here. You know, I'm looking at the first one, and it always starts there. Does anyone want to chime in on what that looks like?
If it's okay, I'll chime in here. So I referenced a few moments ago, I had this mini blow up, and that was the sign to me that something needed to change. And so I thought I just needed a few days off. I was going to take some extended time around the holiday. Well, I took one day off and I couldn't get out of bed. I was so gripped with anxiety. I was like, I need to do something right now. And so I took advantage of the EAP that my employer was offering at the time, the employer support that they were offering at the time. And I went in and I sat down with a therapist, and they said to me, you're in a state of burnout. And you've probably been there for 2.5 of the 3 years that you've been with that organization. The first thing I want you to do is see a doctor. Now, I'm in the world of HR. I see requests for leaves of absence come through all the time, and they're quoting work-related stress. But I was also in a cynical state, which is one of the symptoms of burnout. I went to see the doctor, and I'm filling out the questionnaire, a process that I had undermined many times looking at requests for leaves. But as I'm working through the answers to the questions and then having my conversation with him, I realized these answers are not made up. this is what I'm experiencing. This is true in reality for me. I requested 3 weeks out. My physician looked at me and said, I will write you out for no less than 6 weeks and do not come see me before week 5. It was at that point that I realized that I wasn't just tired, but that I was really burned out. While WHO doesn't classify burnout as a medical condition, I was given a medical condition by my physician, and it was major depression and anxiety. So there is a medical diagnosis that goes with the condition, even though WHO doesn't recognize it as such. But it was in that moment that I had to admit, ooh, you have nothing left. You are running on fumes and you have to make a change.
You know, so you bring me to a question that I have to ask. So if indeed, like if you stayed up for 6 weeks, so week 5 comes and you know you're about 7 days away from going back.
Yeah.
What's the process to just mentally preparing yourself to being back in the place that maybe caused the stress in the first place?
Yeah. Long story short, I never returned to that place.
Oh, okay.
That 6 weeks was extended to 12 weeks.
Good
My
for you.
physician did tell me that about 5 weeks in, I would probably regress. And I did. It happened in my car, driving the route that I would take to work, going to a completely different destination. And the closer I got to the exit I used to take to my work, I began to have a panic attack. And so that's where the request for extending the leave of absence was made. And then right at week 11, I had to face the reality that returning to that situation was not going to be healthy for me. It was not going to continue to support my recovery. And so I did not.
Interesting. So yeah, so you definitely, I'm looking at the second bullet, you definitely put distance between yourself and the stressors. Yes. In that case. And then you focused on your health as well. So kudos to you. I'm glad you were able to navigate that. And coming from someone with an HR lens and background, I think, do you feel that particular knowledge that you bring just from a career standpoint was extremely helpful? And if someone doesn't have that skill set, is HR the place they should go to kind of get support and guidance?
Yeah, it's a starting place because it wasn't extremely helpful to me. I was living it. I was too close to it to even apply the guidance and the coaching that I had given to so many other people. But to answer your question, yes, HR within your organization is a good starting place. I long for the day where HR is no longer seen as an enemy to employees of an organization, but as a friend, as well, maybe not a friend, as an advocate, right? As a co-partner in this place that we call work, doing the things that we call work. So yeah, in short, HR is a good place to start.
Yeah. Excellent. All right. So Jenny, here, bullet 4 here, reevaluating your goals and values. Such an important part of work life in general, right? But as it relates to burnout, kind of tap in and kind of give us some guidance on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we are misaligned, particularly when it comes to something deep as far as like values and purpose and vision and who we are and how we're operating day to day, then we are, again, depleting resources. We're using our resources in ways that are not natural or aligned or just really purposeful for us. And so when we're thinking about, when we on that road after burnout, when we've kind of burnt out, we've given all we've had, I think it's really important to come back to self a bit more because we're probably, being pulled by the demands of external, forces, our supervisors, our teams, the organizations, just the need to survive and thrive in these, systems. And so that could be really hard. And so if we can, take time to really come back to journaling or reflecting or just building this reflective practice of like, well, why, what am I here for? What's my contribution to this world and my one life, we're really kind of coming back to that and seeing what steps you can take to pivot that way. You know, I think the very like hard reality sometimes around burnout is, you know, at least for me, you know, I felt stuck in that situation I was in because I needed a job. I just had a child. I, you know, needed health insurance. And so the lack of control was very much there because I needed to be there in order to sustain and to live. And so I think the exercise is, well, then what can you do almost incrementally until you can get out? Because I did eventually get out. But what can you do to shift the way you work, what you focus on, what you don't focus on in the day-to-day to help yourself sustain as you kind of bounce back from this experience?
You know, it's interesting because both of you speak to kind of removing yourself from the situation in one way or another, right? And I'm curious, is that the thing, like that light at the end of the tunnel, making a decision that you're going to find a way to kind of remove yourself from the situation? Is that the thing that allows one to continue to operate, but still have some type of relief that help is on the way, for lack of better words? Is that making sense at all? Like, is it, I'm leaving so I know that I can get through it for this window?
Yes,
Yes,
you know,
and
yeah, because you know, at least for me in the toughest moments, I was like, I'm leaving. This is not an environment, you know, and you really become aware of the health impacts, just the overall impact that it's having, and it's detrimental. But the ability to leave, unfortunately, you know, involves things that are out of your control, jobs that are available, getting those jobs that are available. You know, like I just recall myself, like you go kind of going through interview processes where honestly, I felt like my burnout was like communicating through in the desperation for another role. And that was really, really hard. So it did take a little while. And I do think that while, you know, it can serve as the source of like recalling that you're, you know, where the situation you're in is not permanent. Nothing ever is. That is, I think, a helpful frame. But I want to acknowledge and like empathize with the difficulty that it is in reality sometimes to kind of move past that.
yeah, I would ditto what's just been said, and the word that you use, stuck, is such a great descriptive word for how burnout feels many times, is that you're stuck. But to answer or respond to your question, Kenneth, leaving is the ultimate end if the situation doesn't change. If you advocate for yourself, if you set boundaries, if you communicate your current state and you make requests for support and you don't get it, it's not the organization for you anyway. So it's time for you to then move on. And, you know, we say in our own community, stay ready so you don't have to get ready. When it comes to employment, I would strongly encourage you to always be ready to move on to your next, because when burnout starts to set in, you can't even properly process that. So Jenny, your desperation probably was coming through in those interviews because you were in survival mode in a way that you may have never been in survival mode before, and you knew the answer was to get out.
You know, I want to touch on this, and this is kind of off the slide detail, I guess, but we're firmly upon the holiday season, and you always hear people speak about, just because of finances and just different responsibilities added on to your everyday responsibilities, travel, who knows what it could be. People often go into, it's just very stressful for a lot of people. And then you combine that with some work related things, and that can shift you into burnout. Do you guys have any advice for people as we embark upon the holiday season on how they should approach that to just keep themselves really healthy mentally?
Yeah, absolutely. Earlier, I made reference to shared responsibility. And so while the organization has greater influence on the work environment and how business operates, we have the most influence on ourselves and the most responsibility to ourselves, right? And so using myself again as a live example, I'm experiencing symptoms of burnout right now because it's the close of the year. It's a busy season. There's a lot going on. And what I have to stay mindful of, and what I would encourage others, is to stay mindful of the things that you do for you, your nutrition. Make sure that you have healthy eating habits in place. Stay hydrated. Be active, some form of exercise to release the stress and strain of each day. And then make yourself as much of a priority as you make gift shopping, gift giving, showing up to meetings at work. If it's 20 minutes in a day or 30 minutes in a day, give yourself the type of rest that you need in order to stay energized and focused and manage your stress levels.
Yeah. Jenny, anything you'd like to add?
Very similar. I mean, I think, I want to amplify that, we are and we have been living through really intense times, and that affects us. Like, well, I'm affected by the news of the world, by the working world, by everything that we're carrying is present with us. And so I would just echo what Chanel says of, like, how do you find ways to prioritize what you need, because we want to play a long game here. We are playing a long game, and so how do you institute processes in your day, even if it's these micro moments? I do think they have macro impacts if we kind of commit to them over time. And so as the holidays come around, that's what I'm looking for, is those moments to less social media and more looking at trees, to be honest.
I love it. Speaking of loving it, I love our audience. I've been peeking into the chat, and I just want to commend you guys for kind of rallying behind people and sharing great information as well. The speakers and our attendees. So thank you so very much for just being who you are, everybody that's on today. All right, let's jump into this. All right, we talked about, steps to recovery. Let's talk about strategies to try. So there are 12 strategies that we have listed here that individuals can try, and I think it's an important part of the conversation. So Chanel, I want to speak to this. I want you to start us off here, because it seems like this is an approach that you not only recommend, but have even taken advantage of.
Yes, yes, yes. So getting professional help is at the top of the list, and I don't think that is coincidental. I think it's because it's the most pertinent part of recovering from burnout. My recovery journey took almost 5 years because I did not have the proper knowledge of what I needed and who I needed to be on my team. My therapist is at the top of the list. And I know in our community, mental health is a topic that we don't like to talk about a lot. And sitting down with a therapist is something that we've been taught, right, through actions and demonstration not to do. What goes on in my house stays on my house, and don't be out here telling people my business. Find you a therapist to tell your business to. The shared responsibility in burnout is understanding where your value and your worth comes from, and being able to disconnect that from an organization, a position, or the work that you're doing. Most of us have childhood experiences and childhood trauma that has molded our perception of how we contribute value and where that value comes from. Doing the work to identify your value and your worth as an individual first and foremost will help to make the rest of these strategies one that you understand and implement. When you understand your value, you'll make time for exercise. You'll make sure that your diet is healthy, not for the purpose of losing weight. That's not a byproduct, but for the purpose of being able to show up as your best self and to have people experience you in the ways that you would like to experience them to experience you. Extending grace to yourself. So practicing self-compassion, again, is very connected to doing the work to address your childhood experiences and any other life experiences that may have distorted your vision of who you are and why your value or where your value comes from. Setting boundaries and enforcing them. The first company I worked for after experiencing burnout and leaving the company that I was at, my supervisor would say to me, Chanel, I admire how you enforce your boundaries. Well, at that point, it was from a place of fear. I was fearful of returning to the state of burnout, of it being a struggle to get out of the bed, of that endless hopelessness, right? So I set my boundaries in place and I enforced them aggressively. Now, through the ongoing self-work with my therapist, I set boundaries from a place of understanding that this is what I need. And it's just as important to me, even if it's not important to you, my employer, my friend, my parent, right? And then being aware of your triggers, that's going to be important as well. That awareness will have you look out for the symptoms and then make the self-adjustments that you need in order to stay or get back to your healthy place.
Wow, great,
So
great.
those are the things I like wrap my arms around and don't let go of, you know. And when you begin to implement these things, you'll see the difference. I had stress-induced dermatitis. I had weak points in my hair, and so I would lose hair, my scalp would be inflamed. Things that you don't typically connect back to stress or burnout, they're really real, and the impact on your body is really real.
You know, I appreciate that this platform, the Urban League Jobs Network Digital Career Success Series platform, allows us to connect at so many different levels. I'm going to tell a quick story here, and then I'm going to bring Jenny in because she's part of the story. So we were working in Houston, and we're on the conference floor, and it's a whole day of activity. And I was leaving out to just grab something to eat after the events were over for that day. And I sit down at this restaurant, and someone sits next to me, and I look, and it's Jenny. And we had just done a panel together earlier that day, but I noticed that she had like, I guess we'll just call it a notepad, right? But it was a journal, I'm assuming, right? And we started discussing and just talking. So I probably interrupted her journaling, but I'm like, wow, she probably was going to sit down and kind of walk through her thoughts on everything that happened in that day. So Jenny, I'm bringing that up to have you speak a little bit about the importance of journaling and how it works to kind of combat some of the things that you may be encountering.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me across my career, having a practice of reflection, a reflective practice embedded, has been such a grounding process. And so I write, and like pen to paper, that feels like, some type of different connection than like typing or whatnot. It's only, just for me. And so, I think it allows me to anchor a bit amidst the chaos that can happen in a 24-hour period, in the things that I can't control, in everything that comes my way, in the challenges, the obstacles. I will always be able to come to my pen and paper. And that's like, I can count on that. And that feels, stabilizing in a way. And so I think it just helps me to conceptualize and reflect upon, the experiences, reflect upon what's hard, and really know and recall that, I do have agency, even the moments that I feel like I don't. I do have agency. And that's really a lot of the conversations I have with, folks navigating their careers, that feels like that's gone. The more that we can reconnect to that, and journaling can be a practice of that. Not everyone journals, but that finding that practice, I think, is essential. Because I think when we try to think about burnout recovery, we want to really think about it as burnout prevention. And so really, really early thinking every day, asking yourself the question, am I well resourced today? Every day, in the morning, at night, am I well resourced today? And you can maybe start to pinpoint areas that you aren't, and that you then realize and make changes or make these micro adjustments over time that then keeps burnout at bay, because we don't even the road to burnout is not pleasant either, so.
It's holistic, right? Someone just said they have a gratitude jar, right? I don't know. We were in Houston. I'm not sure if we ate healthy for that lunch that day. I don't
I
know.
don't
I
think
don't
so.
recall, but we did refuel for sure. But good sleep hygiene, right? Are people getting rest and just are you doing things that make you happy? Finding that space, I think all are extremely important. I'd like to real quick before we jump into the Q&A conversation. I've seen some people speak about wanting to alert their support system, but they don't know if that's an internal or external mentor, sponsor, what that looks like. Can we just speak a little bit about, how you approach your support system and what should be your true expectations of that particular individual or system?
Mm.
That's a great question.
I'm happy to kick off. I think ultimately the support system will be defined by the trusted relationships you have. So that may be internally within your organization. Like for me, when I was kind of experiencing that difficult work environment, I did have a trusted small group of colleagues that were also kind of experiencing the challenging work environments. And so that, again, making processing in community and connection was a source of fuel of being able to navigate that. But that might not be internal to your organization, or it may not be, it may be trusted friends or a partner or anywhere that you can, I think, speak candidly, openly, authentically, really vulnerably, and be received. And particularly if you don't know what to ask for, like how, like I think that's what sometimes would happen is I don't know what support to ask for. Having someone that knows you and know what support you need just based off of that relationship, I think has a balm to this, burnout experience.
Anything, Chanel, that you'd like to add?
Most of us have a inner circle, a small group of 4 or 5 individuals we can be our full selves with. And so for me, those were the individuals that I turned to once I realized where I was. What I learned from them is that they had already recognized that that's the state I was in, and that had been praying consistently that I not experience a mental breakdown because that's where they thought I was on my way to. So it was them who sat next to me on my couch in silence when I didn't have any words to say, but just needed to feel the presence of someone I knew cared about me there. My parents as well. I remember taking a trip home, didn't know why. I just knew I needed to be home. And I spent most of that time in a room that was designated for me while I was there, but I just needed to feel close to someone or someone's that created safety and a sense of security for me. So it goes back to what Jenny was saying. The people that you can be the most vulnerable with are who you want to turn to, and also those that you allow to hold you accountable, right? They're not going to let you stay in that place.
Yes.
Stay in that dark place. They're going to encourage you. They're going to do the work with you. They're going to remind you of what you said you wanted to do, become, and who you are.
I love it. Chanel Johnson, Jenny Vasquez Newsom. We are going to jump into the Q&A section of the program. And I want to start it off with a question that we received. So, and either one can jump in on this, but all right, what if you don't feel psychologically safe to admit that you're burned out in your workplace because of mistreatment? It's difficult to be transparent when you don't feel safe with leadership. Any advice for someone in that situation?
So I empathize, and I that was my experience when I was experiencing burnout. There was absolutely no way I could say anything to my supervisor. It was a challenging work environment because of, just like textbook toxic stuff. And so, I want to also get very clear that we, there are these moments that we do have to assess safety and systems and risk. There's a very real conversation around that where I thought and I felt that if I were to have said something or challenge or whatnot, that the environment would become less safe in that space. And so, my recommendation or my thought is, are there other avenues that may not be necessarily the supervisor, because there's a power relationship there, to get support, which, was connecting to human resources, connecting to, some other resources within the organization to navigate when the source of the burnout was a direct supervisor. That's where you don't, I don't think you address it directly with them.
Yeah, I would echo what Jenny said. Take advantage of the HR department, take advantage of any employee assistance programming that the organization might be offering, because that could help with tactics and approaches to addressing it. And then food for thought. If you don't feel psychologically safe with your manager, then you really have to start asking yourself, is it time for you to make a personal decision for you and take steps towards moving into a position or organization that gives you the opportunity to experience psychological safety with your manager?
Great advice from both of you. Next question. If we get a diagnosis like depression, does that become a mark that follows us?
I think I would need to understand a little bit more, a mark where.
Yeah, I'm thinking, and this could just, and I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but even internally within the organization, as they're trying to maybe make themselves available for stretch assignments or promotions or things of that nature, is that something that might be privy to others?
No, it shouldn't even be privy to your organization. So it would be up to you to share that information, and you would have to gauge whether or not it is an organization that knows how to respond healthily to something like that. But another avenue could be just explaining that you're not feeling 100% right now. And so in order to meet expectations, there's some additional supports that you need, or you would like to talk to someone about how you can still meet the expectations of your job with additional supports and what that could look like. But in terms of the organization marking you, they should not have that visibility to any type of medical condition.
All right, man. I'm looking at this question here. So we have someone in attendance, and they work for an organization where a former employee and colleague came to HR and their supervisor with symptoms of burnout, and they were promptly let go. And at least that's the interpretation they have of that. But they also say that has made them nervous to reach out when their mental health systems flare up. But they think their supervisor would be accommodating, but they're not 100% sure. Do you have any suggestions on how they should approach and kind of operate and live basically in that situation? There's some trust issues.
If it's all right, I'm going to answer that question through my HR lens, if that's okay.
Let's do it.
Please do. Yes.
You bring that to the conversation, and we appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. More often than not, if I had time to do the research, I could give you a quantitative statistic for it. But more often than not, there's a piece in that scenario that your friend or the person that you know is not being completely honest about. It is a legal liability for an employee to present to their organization a concern or a complaint or a need, and that to be responded to with the termination of their employment. Mm-hmm. So I would not put a whole lot of weight on that scenario, and instead assess the current state of your relationships with your organization, whether it's the manager, the HR department, or what so have you, and do your best to explain to them what you need and why you need it.
Okay. That makes sense. I hope that offered value. I think it came from a coaching lens that you might not get anywhere else, but you get it here on the Urban League Jobs Network Digital Career Success Series. Thank you so very much for answering in that and through that lens and in that fashion. I appreciate you, Chanel. What do you do if you cannot leave your job due to having to take a pay cut, or because you're near retirement? So someone is near retirement. They're in a situation that's not comfortable, but they're concerned about leaving just due to not being willing to take a pay cut.
Mm. Or maybe not able to take a pay cut based off
And,
of,
I caution individuals in assuming that no one else is willing to pay them even more
That's
than
right.
they're currently receiving.
That's
Um,
right.
you know, that may be a bigger picture to that conversation. I think you'd probably be surprised that if you package your skill set right and work with the right people on how to pitch and find and identify opportunities, you may find more somewhere else.
Right. And I think I feel like sometimes we have a tendency to like have a lens of scarcity, because we feel it, like it just feels like everything's competitive, or we're not going to find, something else. We have this, financial security, and we should value it because it might not be possible elsewhere. But, I think testing that assumption is a step. If you truly are like what we've said, stuck, or like, in this space where you have to persist in an environment. I mean, honestly, I've had conversations with leaders and folks experiencing burnout or experiencing tough situations, where sometimes the advice is to like do less, looking for ways to just dial it in, and like just do what you need to do, nothing more, nothing less, but in an effort of self-preservation, because that is number one. We want to preserve ourselves, because if we are no longer, then none of this has a point. And so really looking for these areas or ways to either relieve some load or relieve some emotional load, or kind of the cognitive load that you're carrying. I am confident a lot of times there are spaces where we can kind of drop some of it to maybe sustain a little bit more.
I appreciate that. I'd like to close out by offering you guys the opportunity to share a final thought with the audience. So Chanel, we'll start with you. Any final words for the audience? And by the way, we can go to the slide where you guys can have see Chanel's contact info. But in that moment, is there anything that you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. Burnout or various forms of burnout is almost unavoidable. But how you manage yourself, being aware of your needs and staying connected to that, making sure that you value yourself first and foremost, will help to manage that. So make sure that you're engaging in the right rest. Make sure that you're assessing your value through the right lens. Get whatever support and help you need in order to do that. And when you look at employment, see it through the lens of how does this benefit you? What is your purpose for being here? And how can you capitalize on that? I'm going to share a book recommendation here in the chat that I think would be helpful to many of you, and strongly encourage you to read it. It's called Sacred Rest, and it talks about the 7 types of rest that we need to be healthy individuals.
Well, thank you for sharing that resource. Definitely going to look into that. Jenny, would you like to share any final words with the audience?
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately, the ideal and what I think we should as a society work towards is, going into workplaces and being filled by them, not depleted. And, I think we are unfortunately navigating a lot of times at the opposite, where we give all of ourselves to work because we need to, because we're required to. And that, has a cost. And so I would say, really remain cognizant of the costs, and where can there be a rebalancing, either in these micro ways or in these, approaches, or maybe these shifts completely towards, more values aligned professions, or, ways that you're spending your time, because, again, we have a lot to offer the world, all of us, and anywhere that is diminishing that or taking advantage of that, or really kind of using that to its wit's end, then it doesn't deserve our contributions. And so really kind of thinking about what that might mean for you. It's hard. So I empathize with the difficulties of this, and I'm glad we're just having these conversations, to be honest.
I'm glad we're having these conversations as well. And please continue the conversation by connecting through. I see that Jenny shared her IG information. She's a good follow. I follow her myself and find a great deal of not only inspiration, but just solid resources and contact stuff from following Jenny. So thank you so very much for being so open with our audience. Also, could you please let them know about the book again?
Yes. So Untapped Leadership, Harnessing the Power of Underrepresented Leaders. It is challenging what is traditionally placed on the bookshelves or on like even business school syllabi around leadership. It has largely been white and men that are publishing and are the authority on leadership. And we need to change that narrative, because I think it ultimately brings in the depth of context that we all have. And I think changes the way we experience our workplaces, because when we lead, that's when we thrive.
I love it. Shawnell Johnson, Jenny Vasquez Newsom, subject matter experts in a lot of different spaces, but definitely on supporting you in your recovery from burnout. My name is Kenneth L. Johnson. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today for our end of the year Urban League Jobs Network Digital Career Success Series. Makes me sad because I really enjoy this, and I enjoy sharing this time with each and every one of you that just lock in with us on the topics and share your work stories and share your locations and all of that. So I just want to say thank you. But at first, I'd like to say thank you on behalf of myself, but also on behalf of the National Urban League, Wanda Jackson, Dory Brown. I know Dory's not going to come on and put her camera on, but trust me, this would not happen without her. She does a great job of pulling this all together. So Dory, I'd like to say thank you for being you and being amazing in the work that you do. My name's Kenneth L. Johnson. God willing, we will be back again next year, 2024, y'all. Can you believe it, to do this again? But even before then, I want to wish everyone a happy holiday season. And with that being said, we are signing off for 2023. Kenneth L. Johnson, Urban League Jobs Network Digital Success Series, brought to you by the National Urban League. Thank you so very much to our guests today. I appreciate all of you for hanging out with us. See you next year.